Okay, so talking about images in WordPress and working with different sizes and that kind of thing. Uh, One of the first things we need to know before we even get to the WordPress side of things, that's kind of foundational for making sure that your images aren't way too big or way too small, is what a pixel is. And so a pixel is basically the smallest dot on an image or a screen. Um, so like on a typical widescreen, 1080p, it's 1080 because it's 1080 pixels tall and 1920 wide. On phone, it might only be 350 by 600 or something like that. You get some extra complication with Retina and high DPI devices like iPhones, where they actually have two dots per pixel, kind of. And I'm going to show you an image here, and I'm going to have to upload it. So here's a very zoomed in shot of Google's Doodle from today, and you can see all these little kind of square looking things. I'll zoom in even further, and you can really see it's like, ooh, but that's what everything on your screen is made up of. And if you look really close, you can see there's green, blue, and red in there as well. So every pixel is part green, part red, and part blue. So those are pixels. And so the trick with websites is, or images on the web in general, is to make sure that you don't have too many pixels for the space where you're displaying the image. And so we'll get into a little bit more of that here in a minute. But now let's dig into what it looks like to add images into a post or a page in WordPress. So I'll add a new post. And we will call it John's Monkeys. Oh no, I was going to do Seth. People call me that too sometimes. John's Monkey, a review. Just randomly, because I have some monkey pictures that I downloaded from Unsplash. And so if we want to add an image, as Kristen showed us, we go to add a new block, we choose image. We can add stuff that's already in our media library or upload something new. We will go ahead and grab something new. And here's a cute little monkey. And WordPress will do its thing and process that. So while it's doing that, I'll tell you what the blazes it's doing. So one of the things it's doing is making sure that image isn't bigger than a maximum size. Currently, the default is 2,560 pixels. So if your image is bigger than that, WordPress will automatically scale it down to 2560 without you having to do anything. This one probably was bigger than that. And so if we go over here, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. So that's the first thing it does. The second thing it does is it creates a bunch of smaller versions of that image, because even a 2560 version of an image is way too big for a web page. So it creates all these smaller versions, and to use one of those smaller versions, by default, they're going to pop the large one in there. I believe that's the default. And then you can go over here and pick from, the medium version. You can even go with the thumbnail, which would be kind of weird all by its lonesome. But you can pick these different ones. You can even go full size if your image is not ginormously large. But even if it is, you could use these other controls like 50% and 25% to make it a little bit more reasonable. Now the trick with that is that it's not actually making the image 25% of what it was. It's going to display your full size image in a quarter of the box. And so that might not be the greatest thing all the time. But in this case, it might turn out all right, and I'll show you why here in a second. So let's save and preview in a new tab, because what I want to show you is how in the world you can find out what size an image should be. So if you right click on anything on a web page, you can click on inspect, and it will show you a lot of information that might be way over some people's heads. But we'll keep it simple and just look at, this is what an image looks like in the code. So if we just hover over it, it'll give us some information about that image, notably that it's being displayed at 640 by 424 pixels. But the image actually is 1536 by 1017. Because this is on a Retina device, that actually turned out pretty good. So we needed a 1280 pixel image by about 840. You'll notice, if you look really close, that there's like 15 different versions of my image right there. And then there's this sizes attribute down at the bottom, and that tells the browser which one of those it ought to choose. And so in this case, it's telling it, if the screen is smaller than 640 pixels, use the image that is the full width of the screen. If it's bigger than that, use the one that's closest to 640. I prefer to just go with either the medium or the large version, so we'll just do that for now. You can, of course, change the alignment. So if your image doesn't quite fill up the whole space on the web page that's been allotted, so like in this case, a 640 space, if it's smaller than that, you can go up here, change the alignment to center, or you can make it right, and then it'll let the text flow around it. The medium size, you go under settings and go to media, and this will let you see what sizes are currently being generated, some of them. You have the thumbnail, which is 150 by 150, medium size at 300, and the large size at 1024. And by default, none of those will be cropped, they'll just be scaled, so it'll preserve the dimension or the aspect ratio. So it won't make it square unless you use, like the thumbnails, if you tell it to crop, then it will, but otherwise it will not. Now that's not all that it's doing. And so to see everything else that it's doing, we're gonna take a look at the plugin that I wrote, the EU Image Optimizer, and we're gonna go over to the resize tab real quick here. And these are all the sizes that are actually being generated for every single image I upload. The thumbnail, the medium, a medium large version that we did not see in that selector on here. You know, we only saw the 3 options. So there are some of these that aren't available to be chosen directly. But then we have the large, we have a 1536 version, and then this theme, the 2017 theme, has a couple versions that it generates, a very large one at 2000 and a thumbnail avatar. And then this stuff only applies to PDFs at the very bottom there. So those are all the sizes currently being generated on this site. Depending on your theme and plugins, you might end up with 15, 20, or even up to 50 in some crazy cases. All right, so that was an image. Let's go ahead and get some text in here. There we go. And then let's look at galleries. So gallery is another commonly used block for images. And for this, I'm going to use some of the images that I pre-uploaded so that we don't have to wait for a whole pile of images to upload. Oh, that didn't do what I wanted it to. That's what happens when you use a Windows keyboard with a Mac. So we choose the images we want, insert gallery, and WordPress is going to go ahead and arrange those for us. And so then we have some options with this gallery. that are over here on the side. We can choose how many columns we want, whether we might want 4, or if we really got a huge gallery, or maybe we just want it to be nice and condensed. That actually looks kind of good at 5. So you can go, however you want, whatever you think looks best for the images that you're uploading. By default, it's going to sort of crop, but really what it's just doing, it's forcing it into that box and hiding the edges. It's not really cropping any of the images. It's just hiding the overlap that doesn't fit in the box. And then you can choose if you want the images to link to the full-size versions of themselves, which is media file, or an attachment page, which is kind of, let's see, like this, where it's a page on your site that displays the image, which isn't always super helpful, but it's there, so someone must use it. And of course, you can always link individual images to anything that you want, but galleries, you're just limited to those 3 options. And then you can choose the image sizes. So here, these are pretty small, and so I'm just going to guesstimate that I probably want the medium ones. And so those should work good for all of these. If we had some really big ones, say we had gone with like 2 columns, and you've got these really big gallery images, you can see how, hopefully you can see that this got a little blurry. And so in that case, we'd probably have to bump it up to large, and then that clears it up. So that's kind of one of the things you're looking for. Basically go with the smallest size that doesn't make the images in the gallery look blurry. And of course that image size, as you probably noticed, affects all the images at once. You can't choose individual sizes per image. All right, one more kind of fun block that I think Kristen showed is the cover block. And this is a tricky one, and you have to be really careful with this, that you don't use an image that's way bigger than the space that's going to be displayed in. All right, so this lets you have a picture with some text overlaying it. And so you can change, some of the text settings and whatnot there. But if you click off the text, you get settings related to the actual image. And so you can have a fixed background, and there's the focal point where you can change kind of where it's focusing. Would probably have to zoom in a little bit more, which you can do somewhere here, I think. But anyway, so if you zoomed, that would make more difference. You can do a fixed background, which is kind of fun. Not super useful for this particular image, but it holds the image in place while you scroll, which is kind of a fun effect. The slight downside of that is you have to use a bigger image because it has to actually be the full size of your screen. So probably at minimum 1,000 some pixels tall. So let's save this because I mentioned that this can be tricky for having too big of an image, which I do in this case. I already know that, but I'm going to show you what that actually looks like. And so when we hover over this block cover container, actually that's not the container, this is. We see that it's 740 pixels wide by 430 tall. And so you go, well, how big is the image? So if we go over here, click on that actual where it has the background image URL, then come over here, come on. we see it's 2560 because I didn't crop it or scale it or anything before I uploaded. So that's not awesome. You know, that's over three times too wide. And so just rough math, it's a two-dimensional thing. So it's 9 times bigger than it needs to be at least. So here is where we can go in, and we've already saved our draft. So we can go out to the media library. There's other ways to get into this too, but go and edit this image. And we wanted it to be 740 pixels wide. So I'm going to scale it to 740. And I don't think you have to do this, but I always do just to be safe. Click the update button. And then we can go back to our post. And what we want to do is make sure that it's using the small version, because when WordPress scales that down, it creates a new file and saves the old version as a backup. And so we're going to go back out to preview now. Same thing, right click on the image, choose inspect. You can also get to the dev console with Control Shift C or Control Shift I, or on a Mac that's Command Shift I or C, and update it. So in that case, we're going to go and hit replace, open media library, and we're just going to pick the same image again. Oh, there we go. And now what you can see, what I was talking about with the new file, because we have this nifty little bunch of numbers added to the back end of the file name, and we're going to select that. And now we're going to save that in preview. And now our image is actually 740 and our box is 740 and everything is right again with the world. So that's cover blocks. So those are the main three that you would use in WordPress, particularly in Gutenberg. If you're using the classic editor, all bets are off. But you will have the same image sizing settings when you add images in the classic editor, as far as, you know, clicking on this guy and choosing medium, thumbnail, large. You can also make custom sizes. If you install a plugin called Simple Image Sizes, it lets you register and create your own sizes to be generated. So that can be super helpful. But I want to go to something that you may have noticed when we were looking at all the sizes that were being generated on this site. And that is that WordPress is generating one that's 2048 pixels, and the theme has requested one that is 2000 pixels. Well, those are really stinking similar, and that's kind of pointless to have two that are that close to each other. So in that case, you can use just about any image optimization plugin has this, where you can disable the creation of those particular thumbnails for new uploads. And so that way you'll only get one or the other. And if there's any of these other ones that you're like, hey, I don't need that, that's crazy, you can disable those, save, and then all new uploads will no longer have those unnecessary sizes taking up disk space on your website. It will only quit making them. To get rid of stuff like that, you can use a plugin called Regenerate Thumbnails, and it, I believe, now lets you do a force regenerate and delete all the existing thumbnails.